Hi all, welcome back to the semifinals of the Chessable Masters 2020, and I'm going to show you a game between Ding Liren with the white pieces and Magnus Carlsen. In the first set yesterday, Magnus showed true sportsmanship with resigning their second game after Ding disconnected in a drawn position in game 1, defaulting the win to Magnus. At the end of the set though, Magnus still won it in the blitz games. So today, Ding has to win to force a third set. So let's get started. Ding opens with d4, knight to f6, c4, g6, knight to c3, and g5. We have a King's Indian defense with e4, with d6, knight to f3, castles by black, h3, and now striking in the center with e5. We have d5 occupying more space, knight to a6 with the ideas of just bring it to c5, bishop to g5, bishop to d7, bishop to d2 now, and c6. We have bishop to e2, and now queen to b6. Attacking this pawn, we have rook to b1, and now king to h8. We have castles by white, and now c5. It seems a bit strange, because why not take, maybe open the file and get some play. But yeah, Magnus decided to close the position. We have a3 now, and queen back to d8. We have b4 now, and we have b6 by Magnus. We have knight to b5, and queen to e7. We have rook to e1 now, and with h6 now kicking the bishop back, bishop h4, and rook fc8. We have bishop to d3 now, and queen to f8. And now knight to f1, which is a bit weird, but maybe he has ideas of bringing it to e3, maybe to g3. Maybe he has some ideas to maybe push the pawn on f4 and to f5, maybe after the knight is on g3 or on e3. Who knows? Um, Magnus played knight to h5, and we have the knight to e3 now. Bishop to f6, and we have takes and takes, and the knight returns to c3. We have queen to e7, and bishop to c2. We have knight to b8 now, and we have knight to queen to d2 with the king to g7. So there's a lot of shuffling around with the pieces, just trying to nudge them around and put them in the correct positions. We are really used to of this playstyle by Ding. We have king to h2 now, and we have takes and takes on b4 and a5 challenging the b4 pawn. We have rook to a1 saying, okay, you can't capture because then I will capture your rook. Knight to a6 now, and now we have takes and rook takes on a5. So effectively, Ding has won a pawn here, but it will be very hard to make it count because after Magnus played knight to c5, the extra pawn is this c pawn, and this one is not going anywhere. And maybe Ding can force something on the king side, but yeah, he would really like to make his play on the queen side here. So we have rook e to a1, and now takes on a5, and queen to d8 attacking the rook. Rook back to a3, and rook to b8. Now, okay, you have white has the a file, black takes the b file. So we have f3 now by Ding, creating a very nice pawn structure here. We have knight to h7, maybe with ideas of playing a g5. We have knight to e2, and now queen to h4. Maybe starting an attack on the king side now. We have rook back to a1, and we have knight to f6 now. Queen to e1 now. There's actually a trick in this position which I wanted to show you with bishop takes h3 and after g takes, you'll get it in this position where actually black wins well a few pawns for this the sacked piece, and actually can take here another pawn. So yeah, it's now 3 pawns against the bishop. So that would have been an interesting sacrifice to make. But he didn't do it. He played knight to f6. So queen to e1 now, and queen back to g5. Bishop or rook to a3, defending this knight, of course. And we have knight to a5 now. With g3, saying you're not going anywhere here. And queen goes back to d8. Queen to a1 now. Maybe have an eye on looking at this king. Maybe now with the ideas of playing f4. We have knight to f6 and f4 by Ding. Magnus played queen to e7, and we have knight to c3. Maybe he could have taken a pawn as well, and then play knight to c3, because then he would have created 2 passed pawns here. But he didn't do that. He played it immediately with king to h7, and now f5 even. With king back to g7. If you take, you just allow a bit too much for white, where the king's black's king safety is now compromised, and you can see that well, white can go here very quickly with moves maybe g4, h4. Maybe the king can come to c1, attacking that pawn. Maybe the knight can come to g4. So black definitely doesn't want to capture. So after f5, he played king to g7, and now rook to a7, and now g5, just closing up the position. We have king to g2 now. Maybe um, knight here would have been better. This is a great outpost for the knight, putting some pressure on this pawn. But Ding played king to g2. We have queen to d8, king to f3 now, h5, queen to c1. Thinking, okay, maybe this pawn is now undefended. So if I move this knight, let's say maybe to g2, maybe I can get in here. Um, Knight to g2, knight to well, maybe knight to h4, and there are some options here. So queen to b6, rook to a1, rook to g8 now, queen to d2, queen to d8, rook to g1. So what I found interesting about this is that all pieces have moved from the queen side towards their focus to the king side. And we have rook to h8 now, and now h4, trying to bust open the position. But Carlsen says no and just plays king to g4 with now king to e2. And actually, this position is just very favorable for white in general. I mean, he is a pawn up. He should probably have played king to g2 here, because I think king to e2 is just he kind of leaves the safe position of his king, and moves it to the center. But he's white is still better here with king to h7. And now, since this is close, we go we move all our pieces back to the queen side. So we have queen to a5, knight e to d1, rook to g8, knight to f2 now, queen a6, attacking this lonely fella, and knight to b5. Finally, this knight finds his great position on b5, rook to b8, and now bishop to d3, attacking or defending this knight. And we have takes and takes on b5, and now queen to a4. So now white has a passed pawn, and as always, you have to wonder: is this gonna be a strength of white or a target for black? Of course, it's both, but who will win? Who will win that? So um, this black has a very strong knight on c5, controlling some very interesting, well, not that one of course, but some very interesting squares here. Um, so this knight is very strong. This bishop is mainly looking at to his own pawns, who will never move again. This bishop is only helpful in defending this pawn. And so far, the two pieces who do nothing is, well, the one piece I should say is this knight and this knight, but they're both hitting e4, so it will be very hard for white to do something here. He'll have to place, something strange like king to, well, not, obviously not, but um, he has to defend this pawn somehow before he can move this knight. So maybe he should do queen to c2 and move this knight to c3, just defending it like this. And then slowly but surely he can try maybe try to make some progression. But with all that being said, let's see how Magnus reacts to this, or how Ding reacts to this actually. He plays queen to b4, just saying, okay, I want to simplify this position. If I and also he takes away this square from the queen, so maybe now he has the idea of playing queen e3 and bringing the knight back into the game. Queen a2 with check, queen to b2, and queen back to a4. Queen to b4, queen a2 check, rook b2 now, queen a1, rook b1, and if Magnus would have played queen to a2 check, it would have actually been a threefold repetition, and it would have automatically resulted in a draw. But Magnus, even when being a pawn down, is not interested in a draw, and he plays queen to a7 now, saying you have this extra pawn, but your king safety is weak, much weaker than mine. So if you try to force things, I will just crush your position around your king. So we have queen to d2 now, and we have knight takes on d3. Probably, well, maybe he could have played, well, bishop c2, perhaps. Like with the idea of well something well it's some maybe with the idea of if the queen ever moves, you can play his knight over his bishop to a4 maybe, but and after b6 maybe it can go to c6, but it's a whole lot of maybes. But he played queen to d2, and Magnus now decides to trade his great knight against white's weak bishop. An interesting trade. um, but it allows for some infiltrations now on the queen side. So queen a2 check, king f1, and rook to c8 now. Trying to maybe infiltrate to c2, putting some pressure here. So black is definitely now trying to win here. Um, so Ding defends, tries to defend this position, but unfortunately for Ding, queen b3 now completely loses the game. And yeah, try to find black's winning move if I give you a couple of seconds. So, what Magnus played here is rook c1 check. The idea is simple. The rook is defending the queen, so by playing a check here, you distract the rook, um, or you lose it. Either way, either if you take on c1 with the rook, for example, this you lose the queen, and if you do something else, you move the king, then you simply pick up the rook. So yeah, after queen, after king, after the king will move, you pick up the rook. So after the rook comes to c1 with check, it was in that position that Ding Liren resigned the game, and that means Magnus Carlsen is our first finalist. So, um, I hope you enjoyed the game. I thought it was very interesting, with just to play alongst the road, the road to the final. I called it the A and B file, just the only ones being open, and just the positions shifting from the queen side to the king side back to the queen side. And I feel like Ding should have maybe taken a little bit more risk, maybe just opening up earlier or opening up the king side somehow. Um, but yeah, it was still a solid performance, and it was still a very equal position in the end. And instead of this queen b3, the recommended move is knight to d1 here, and it is evaluates as 0.0, so a completely equal game. But yeah, it was not to be. Ding blundered with the queen to b3, and yeah, Magnus goes to the final. So I hope you enjoyed the game. If you did, please do give it a thumbs up and subscribe and comment, and I hope to see you in the next one.